starting to work on the this would be the sliding way, fixed way side of the knee. Got it up on top of the column. Column's on its back still. And so I've been gluing it with the column, which I know is straight now, using the master, the straight edge. And what I was getting was, well, this kind of shows it. I was getting some bluing up here, which would be the bottom side. And I was getting very little up at the top side. And what it actually is, I'm not sure if this is going to show up or not, but I can. This surface here is, you know, relatively flat. It's not scraped yet, but right there, before you get down into the groove, right there, there's a tiny little step. That's probably over time. This is actually where the column was wearing into the knee, and it kind of fades away the further down you go here. I can't even feel it here. It's only about 4 inches. So anyways, the bluing I was getting just didn't make sense, and so I kind of slowed down, and rather than scraping a bunch of stuff, not knowing where you're going, you actually got to find out why it doesn't meet your anticipated marking. So we're going to scrape this out here right now, try and put a little deeper groove in there so we're not contacting that on the edge of the column. So after getting rid of this step down here in this end, I'm actually getting a decent marking. This is the knee on the column. So there's about, I don't know, about 3 inches there that's light or nothing, and then through the center, nice angle, looks good. And then up here at the far end, which is the bottom, just a little light spots. So by getting rid of that step, I'm getting a good, what I would consider a reasonable marking, and especially considering that step would indicate that this edge, this end, was really worn deep, and you know, that would make sense as to the markings now that were higher from here towards the bottom, and this top is light. So we got to scrape now to try and bring this top edge. So one of the things I've got to do now for the Bridgeport is I've got the knee, which is on the column right now, on its back, so this can slide in and out of the camera's view here. That side's the fixed way side, and this side is the gib side. And because of all the changes and the scraping to get rid of the dips and stuff in the ways, everything is moved. So the knee is moved down, and then the knee has moved over with straightening up this straight side of the column. So what we've got to do is got to fit a new gib, and so I'm just preparing right now to measure that. That's one of the last things I need to do here before I can take the column off again and start working on a gib. And so this book here, Machine Tool Reconditioning by Connolly, is really detailed, has a lot of information. And so in here it's got for tapered gibs, gives you all the information on how to measure it, gives you examples, gives you the information on how much extra material to leave, so as you scrape it to fit, you don't lose the length of the gib. If you can imagine, if you kept scraping it and narrowing up the gib, it would go further and further into the opening, what you want is you want to end up with the two surfaces scraped and in good contact with their mating surfaces, and leaving you enough room to adjust the gib as things wear as well. So what I'm doing is I'm just using a parallel gauge. It's a 154A, and I'm just trying to get it just to go in. Then we'll take that measurement, and that'll be our wide end, and we've got to go down to the other end and do the same thing for the narrow end. Down at the small end here, the gap is actually too small for a parallel gauge, so I switched over to gauge blocks. That was 150, that was too small. It's 200, that's too big. And I can't get in between 150 and 200. I don't have that combination in the gauge block set I got. Back to the drawing board. Actually, all you got to do is look for it. There was a 50 thou gauge block in there, so I can make combinations in between 150 and 200. So I'm up to I'm up to 185 right now. What I'm doing is just holding it up against the way and sliding it in. So 185 is too small. 190 is still too small. We're getting pretty close to 200. 195. 195 will not fit. I'm going down to 192. 192 just wants to start. I mean, the actual measurement is, not critical. The gib is going to be scraped to fit, but I just want to make sure that I'm actually going to have somebody make the gib for me. I want to make sure that they have the right taper and the right dimensions to start with, and then of course you add the scraping factor on there, how much material you're going to take off when you scrape. So this is 191. And that goes through with no problem. So I'm going to call it 192. Just because I want to err on the side of thick to allow me to scrape. I'm not sure what I did with the parallel gauge here. I mean, there's nothing wrong with the gauge, just I thought while I had the gauge block set out, I would double check this, and I stacked up my 445 that I wrote down, and I was a mile off. So I stacked up blocks, and this is actually 467. I'm not sure what I did. Might have just been that I read the micrometer wrong. I'm going to try and measure this again just to see what I did wrong. It's always good to know. Like I said, the gauge blocks are pretty much a guarantee. That's reading 467 now. I don't know what I did, but both those are matching now. What I'm in the middle of right now is this is the knee. It's up on the column, and got the surfaces. I'm going to call it 95% scraped, and just want to touch up and get some good bearing quality. But before I do that, what I've got here is just an insert that I've got on the end of a just piece of cold rolled, and what it's good for is cleaning out the groove here at the top of the dovetail, just to make sure there's no interference fit. And I've also used it, you can see my oil grooves here on the flatway of the back of the knee there. You know, and I'm not trying to necessarily create new grooves. I'm just taking the existing grooves and making sure they're deep enough to channel oil. And so anyways, that's what I'm in the middle of doing right now, and so and this is working out well. It's just just use it just kind of like a, I guess more like a plowing a furrow, I guess. And that's what I'm up to at this point. What I'm doing here is this is the new gib for the knee to column. This is the old one on top. I'm just using it as a spacer to clamp here. And before I start scraping in the gib, I want to put in the oil grooves, at least get them roughed in, and then I can, you know, fine tune them as I get closer to a scrape finish. But one of the things I made recently was, this is an old piece of a parting blade, and what I did was I just silver soldered it in here and made up this adapter for the biax scraper. So it's got a little bit of a radius on the front here, and it just it does a nice job of making an oil groove rather than chiseling or hammering the way the book describes on how to make oil grooves. I mean, I could put the gib in the machine and machine it, but this is pretty simple and pretty quick, so that's what I'm using right now. Marking that as an end point there. I don't want to go too far. You don't want the oil to actually come out of the groove. those clamps aren't very tight. I don't want to put any stress into the new gib. It's pretty straight right now. I checked it on the surface plate. So just putting in the oil grooves, and when the gib is installed, this is the knee to column gib, and when it's installed, this would be the top, and the feed's going to come from somewhere about here from the back side, and then I got to put a groove across here, which I'll probably do as I get closer to being fitted. But for now, I've got this in, and I'm going to put the crossover in. And then same thing, and what I gather is the idea behind it is that the oil on this angle covers the width of the gib. And then same thing here, I'll cross it over and then do the same thing there. So the oil would be coming down this way here, cross over, and then do the same thing down here at the bottom of the gib. So this transition is looking pretty good. Now I got to turn it around. It's easier to come into a groove than to start in it.